This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Good evening, and welcome to the Late Late Show on this very late Monday night. Tonight we are talking to Em, who is a qualified SENCO, but currently just a classroom teacher, so we can hear her unique perspective on classroom teachers and inclusion and whole school inclusion and how we are supposed to manage all of that at once.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
So, good evening and happy Monday. We are here with Em, who is a qualified SENCO, but Em has a bit of an interesting story. So she's got a unique perspective on this SEN inclusion business and how it affects schools, how it affects individual classroom teachers, the role of the SENCO within the whole school, how SENCOs can work with classroom teachers, and how different educators within a particular school, including LSAs, TAs, and everyone else, can work together to try and support all students, really. So I've asked Em to join us because of her SENCO / classroom teacher perspective, and I think she has what a lot of classroom teachers like myself don't have. I've got extensive classroom experience. I worked in pastoral for many years, but I am absolutely not. I've never been a member of the learning support or SEN department in any school. And she also, even while being a SENCO, has consistently been a classroom teacher, which is not the case for many people who hold that position. So she's got not a unique, but a rare insight into how we all can work together and try to do what's best for all of our students. So, Em, are you there?
Hi, Ray. Thanks for having me on the show this evening.
Lovely. If you could just make sure your microphone's quite close to your mouth, because you're a little bit quiet on my end anyway. Thank you. So do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience and how long you've been in education?
Yeah, so I've been in education for 13 years. I started out as an English teacher, and I was really passionate about supporting students with SEN needs and decided to become a SENCO. So I was a SENCO for 5 years whilst teaching English and media at my previous school. And then I moved to the East Midlands and became a full-time English teacher.
All right, lovely. And what inspired you to become a SENCO? If you were a teacher for many years before going through that entire process, you must have had a particular motivation or a particular drive, because I can imagine that qualifying for that role is not an easy task that anyone would do lightly.
I think for me, supporting SEN students to achieve their potential is an absolutely amazing opportunity to actually promote inclusion within a school and to make it at the forefront of the school is one thing that I was extremely passionate about. And also having SEND needs myself growing up, having dyslexia and ADHD made me really want to create an inclusive environment for all students, really, and just be able to make inclusion a part of the ethos of any school, but also make it about supporting everyone's needs.
Okay, so thank you for that. So you mentioned that you have some personal experience in school that I suppose similar to my guest on the last show, maybe, because I know you listened to that one as well with Amy when we were talking about neurodivergent educators. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that obviously comes from a personal place, and maybe there was a bit of a personal connection with particular students, or a personal drive to maybe help those students in ways that perhaps you were or were not helped when you were younger. Is any of that the case?
Yeah, I think so. I think growing up in secondary school and being an able student, I was always able to create my own strategies for being able to, get through. And I think if I had a diagnosis of dyslexia and had a diagnosis of ADHD sooner, then I may have been entitled to some support. And it was about those factors that actually made me think about, well, as an educator, what can I do in my classroom to be able to support these learners, but also make sure that it was taken on board by staff members to not only just see SEN as, not a separate divide from being in school, but actually, this is what we are here for, is to support all of the learners and not seeing it as an add-on to something we have to do to just fill in a tick box exercise sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, and it definitely feels that way. It definitely does feel that way sometimes. So yeah, thank you for sharing. And I think having that personal drive really, and that personal experience with the issues is so important. Being able to relate to students on that particular level, and learning from, I guess, your own life experiences that maybe were less than ideal. You mentioned that you when you were younger possibly didn't get the support that you could have, or indeed should have had, that might have made a difference for you. So I can imagine that that comes into your mind. It would come into my mind quite frequently. It comes into my mind. I mean, I think constantly of my teachers in school and the ways that I don't have a, lifelong hatred for any of my schools by any stretch, but I do often think about their faults, and the ways that they could have been improved, and they could have supported different students and myself better. So I imagine that that's quite an important drive to have, I guess. So
It
thank
was
you.
definitely an important drive to have. However, thinking about 10 to 15 years ago, the accessibility and the knowledge and the research that has been founded, and the funding that has gone into SEN, and the importance of understanding that all students are entitled to the best education they can possibly have, is, to make sure that we are fulfilling those children's potential, is exactly what we're here for. And making sure that we're meeting their needs and reasonable adjustments in education.
Yeah, absolutely. So with all of that said about why it's so personal to you, and the ways that it matter, and what you're hoping to achieve, and what's inspired you on your on your educator journey, which sounds so so twee. Um, why did you stop being a Senko? What was it that led you to go back to being a good old bog standard classroom teacher?
Oh, good old bog standard teacher.
Just like me.
For all the teachers who are listening tonight thinking that they're all bog standard, well, the thing is about teaching, as cringy as it may sound, you're all superheroes in your own way, shape, or form. And I think as a Senko, to be able to be able to provide the toolkits for teachers, and to be able to learn and understand the needs of to support students is incredible. And luckily enough, in my last school, I was working in London for 6 years, being able to make a massive difference within the school and the local authority, and to be able to work with some absolutely brilliant people and have a really supportive SLT behind me enabled me to do that. It depends on the location, the setting, the teachers, the parents, and creating that holistic environment for those students. And I was very lucky to do it. And I would never say never about being a Senko again at all. I think moving from the environment of London to the East Midlands, I really wanted to think about what I wanted. And I get asked this question a lot, really. Why am I not a Senko now? What is it that is, made me want to go back to being a full-time teacher? And the fact is, about being with those students full time, what it is that drives me is working in the classroom with students. And as a Senko, your workload is never finished. And I know being a teacher, my workload is never finished. But it's really challenging, up to 60, 70 hours a week, um, sometimes as a Senko, and knowing that your to-do list is never done, and are you doing enough, and budgets and fundings, and sometimes it could be absolutely exhausting, and just realizing, am I happy in what I'm doing? Yes, for the first 3 years, 4 years, yes, it was. But then thinking about what I want, I mean, I'm in my early 30s, and I just wanted to think, is this what I want? And for me, it was a case of thinking, do I want to stick with the Senko route, or did I want to, develop a curriculum and to, um, develop something? So in my current school, I'll be setting up media, which is something I've been very passionate about, and teaching English. So I wanted to go in a different direction of my profession and explore the curriculum, and doing that, really. That's why.
Yeah, no, I understand. I mean, I was a head of year for eight years, I think, and it's just overwhelming, and it gets to the point where your emails and your paperwork and your phone calls and the admin and it just, you feel like you actually spend less time with the kids in the way that you want to, even though that position's supposed to help you do that. It's paradoxical and incredibly frustrating. So yeah, I get the wanting to just be back in the classroom and being able to, well, to try to apply what you've learned in a particular role to a classroom setting. So how do you think you bring your Senko experience into the classroom with you now?
Oh, so as a Senko, understanding the needs of the children. So, for example, cognition and learning is one of the area of needs, and the majority of students, where I teach, it's moderate learning difficulties, and to be able to adapt to meet the needs of those students. And we've got a really fantastic Senko at my school, who I've never seen work harder than anybody. I mean, all Senkos and support staff in any school are absolutely fantastic, and without them, would be in trouble. So to be able to support learners in the classroom is all about adaptability, having those relationships with them, and understanding how to support them through different resources, through the curriculum, and accessibility, really. And also making sure that learners with SEMH needs are, and a really good pastoral system to support you, it is
Mm-hmm.
there. And understanding their pupil passports and what they need, and how you're able to support them within the lesson is paramount. However, there are obviously a lot of challenges with that, and I think that comes to
Mm-hmm.
the actual podcast title itself.
Yeah.
If you want a reminder,
Yeah.
and what that is.
No, it absolutely does. So I think your interesting experiences and choices, and how you're able to bring your knowledge of SEN students and how to support them into the classroom is what we want to talk about. But I just think it's funny because you just talked about how the Senko at your school works so hard and no one's ever worked harder. And I had a conversation with another Senko recently, and mentioned this episode, and said, oh, I'm doing this show on, as supporting SEN students, and I've been told that a Senko is the worst job, and that not anyone who's listening, not by M, just to state for the record, she did not say this. Somebody else said, oh, being a Senko is the worst job in the school, hands down, it's the worst thing. And I said this to the Senko I was speaking to, and she just looked at me and just nodded. Like, yeah, but in fairness, I feel like the only job in education that's not the worst job in the school is a PE teacher. I think we all feel like we have the worst job in the school. I certainly felt that in pastoral anyway. So in a moment, we are going to discuss M's experiences and how that feeds into her classroom practice and specific issues that come up supporting SEN learners, specific difficulties that teachers might have, and how we can hopefully work with the Learning Support Department, SEN Department, and do a little bit better than we're all currently doing, and as we are all constantly trying to do. So, listeners, if you have any contributions to any of this, feel free to call in. I see some people who are listening, who are watching right now on Podbean. So if you have any messages you want to send in, anything, any top tips, any questions that our resident former Senko can answer, feel free to send those in.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Have you checked out their latest releases? Use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading.
Introducing Eton X from Eton College, a diverse range of quality online courses enabling young people to aspire and excel. Designed for self-study, these web-based courses empower your students with essential leadership, communication, and academic skills for success at school and beyond. Our Study Skills course sharpens their learning abilities, while the AI Fundamentals course equips them with vital digital know-how in a fast-changing world. Other popular courses include verbal communication, critical thinking, writing skills, resilience, creative problem solving, and many more. Offer the Eton X curriculum in your school for free. Visit etonx.com to find out more.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
Ofsted finds itself in the news again as inspections, paused for a 2-week period to allow inspectors to undertake mental health awareness training, begin again on the 22nd of January. ITV News shared the results of a survey of almost 2,000 school leaders, which showed that 97% support the removal of single-word judgments. The survey, carried out by NAHT Union, followed the outcome of the inquest into the death of Ruth Perry. The union has urged Ofsted to implement a number of changes, including a mechanism for school leaders to halt an inspection where an inspector's conduct falls below standards, extending the notice period schools receive for inspection, and asking them to revert to a process, however temporarily, of ungraded inspections similar to those conducted during the pandemic. Meanwhile, the BBC reports that Ofsted has apologised fully for the first time for the role it played in Ruth Perry's death. The apology came at the same time as Ofsted responded to the coroner's Prevention of Future Deaths notice. In the PFD response, new Ofsted chief Sir Martin Oliver said, "Such tragedies should never happen again," and that he apologised sincerely for the part inspection played in her death. Since the death of Mrs Perry, schools judged as inadequate on safeguarding alone are now re-inspected within 3 months. Ofsted also changed its confidentiality rules to allow heads to speak to colleagues, family, friends and health professionals about outcomes of inspections before the report is actually published. The Department for Education has committed to working with Ofsted to review things during a consultation in the spring, which it is calling the Big Listen. Education unions praised Ofsted's positive steps, but said they were only the beginning. The weather has been front and centre of the news this week, with schools across parts of Wales and Scotland being forced to close due to snow. Icy conditions and weather warnings made for tricky travel and forced school closures in areas badly affected. For those concerned that the post-pandemic impact of remote learning would mean the end of snow days, pictures on social media and local news proved that this was not always the case. But anyone worried that the icy blasts will last can be assured that the weather is set to return to normal over the next few days. Authors, including Sir Michael Morpurgo and Malorie Blackman, have written an open letter urging the government to invest in early years reading. According to a Book Trust survey, only half of children between 1 and 2 from low-income families are read to daily, with some families struggling to access books and being in need of support. The letter from authors is addressed to both Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer, and says it is not right that children from poorer backgrounds are deprived of a life rich in reading. Sir Michael Morpurgo is president of the charity Book Trust and helped launch their new campaign Get Reading to support disadvantaged children in family reading. He spoke on BBC Radio 4's Today programme, saying that the younger that children are introduced to the power of stories, the better chance there is of putting them on an extraordinary pathway of knowledge, understanding and empathy. He also said that books need to be free at the point of delivery, like the health service. A DFE spokesperson said, "We are committed to raising literacy for children," but Sir Michael said that these efforts are clearly not enough. Finally, The Guardian features an article which looks at research in America that appears to show that children learn better on paper than on screens. The research follows headlines across the pond which focused on the nationwide collapse in reading scores among American youths, citing a 4-point drop in the comprehension skills of 13-year-olds, falling below skill levels of 1971 for the worst performing students. Politicians appear to be assigning blame to the pandemic and the subsequent lockdowns, with remote learning being labelled as bad for students by the Biden administration. Others blame teachers who they say lobbied for lockdowns. However, the article itself focuses on a new study by neuroscientists at Columbia University's Teachers College, which appears to show there is a clear advantage to reading a text on paper rather than on a screen, because it leads to what they describe as deeper reading. A sample of 59 children aged 10 to 12 were asked to complete a series of tasks, which led researchers to conclude that we should not yet throw away printed books and shouldn't rely on the digital revolution just yet. Further details can be read on the Guardian website. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
Okay, so lots to think about in that last news bite. I talked about that story with my year 7 form last week, and they were confused about how that was possible. They couldn't understand how their phones weren't the magic solution to all of their problems, but there we are. All right, so I just want to start, I think, rather than going into specific classroom solutions, or I'm talking as if you're the wizard that's going to solve all our problems, rather than going into specific, questions and hypotheticals and solutions in the classroom, what does a truly inclusive school look like? Like, what in your experience should be the experiences of SEN students? What do you think? Em?
The experience of it. Hello?
Sorry. Yeah, we can hear you now. That's fine.
Hi,
Carry on.
All right, nice one. What is the ideal world for an SEN student? To me, I think for any student, but particularly SEN students, is to have small classes, being able to choose and support their learning through an individualized approach, and to be able to have access to different types of qualifications. So a one size that does not fit all approach is the way forward. So students are able to have a personalized learning plan that they can achieve throughout the education system, and to be able to go on and to succeed. But that's a dream world, really, when it comes to
Yeah.
comes to education, because for any student, they are pushed through an education system where in Key Stage 3 they are doing 4 subjects and predominantly are in sets, and they are not able to have that breadth of support available to them, and therefore having 32 children in a classroom and a teacher having to meet all the needs of those learners can be, in fact, extremely difficult.
Okay, so you mentioned, do you mean when they're in Key Stage 3 and they're in mixed ability groups, that can be a problem? Is that what you think?
No, I think both, really. I think
Okay.
there's a massive debate to set or not to set in schools. I mean, you can look at it on both sides of the picture, really. There's a lot of fear for schools to stay within sets, and mixed ability groups work for some schools, but they don't work for others. And I think it depends on why they choose. I think for SEN learners, having mixed ability groups in a big class is harder for them, and it depends on the level of support that they get. For example, is there a TA in the room who is able to meet the learner's needs, and has the teacher got those accessibility strategies to be able to support them through high quality first teaching?
Right. So I would agree. In my experience, I think it often does come down to the specific school and the specific classes and the students and what works for those people. And again, if anyone has any insight to this that they'd like to share, please feel free to text, because I've got some strong opinions. I have some strong opinions about setting and class sizes. And I mean, let's talk about the class sizes first, because there's only so much schools can do, and there's nothing a class teacher can do about that, because it really does all come down to money and funding and budget. Because I once had a colleague who I have immense personal and professional respect for, try to convince us in a department meeting, this was many years ago, that all the studies, all the research shows that class sizes make no difference. And I'm sat there thinking, like, lady, no difference to what? My mental health, my workload? Like, what are you talking about? The relationships I can build with the students, how much attention I can pay to them individually. Like, if you're measuring by exam results, I still don't believe you. But like, again, please show me the studies. I'll put my hands up if I'm wrong. But in every other sense, of course, class sizes make an enormous difference to the kids present and to the teacher. I know I can do a better job when there are fewer students in the class. I know that is a fact about my life. So class sizes are so important on so many levels, but unless we have the funding to increase staff and school sizes and build more schools, then that's never going to change, is it? So I feel like that particular point we probably would agree on, but there's not much point debating it unless we're debating it in front of number 10. So that's immensely frustrating. And especially if you're a class teacher and you're standing and looking around and every single seat is filled in a 32 seat classroom, and you're just thinking, this literally could not get any worse. It's not even about who the kids are and what their needs are. This is like, we're at max capacity. We can barely move in here. I can't even get to the kids in the back corner, let alone go over and on a regular basis and check their work and ask them questions and check their understanding and ensure they're supported. Like, it's just, it really is just too much. And I will always believe that. And I will always say that schools need to do absolutely everything they can to shrink class sizes. But there's only, like, once it's set, it's set. And there's nothing a class teacher can do. So moving on. What you did mention as well, and this is again almost pointless because the average class teacher has little say, but a bit more say in this than class sizes. The sets. So,
Okay.
I have worked in schools that have different systems to this. I've worked in places that set year 7 students immediately based on primary school and SAT results. That doesn't work. I've worked in places that set after October half term, after the year 7s do a baseline assessment. That was a bit better. I've worked where in a school in a year when we set them after Christmas. That was better still because we knew them better and it was a more holistic, well-informed judgment. I've worked in a few schools that have mixed ability year 7 and then set the students from year 8 onwards. And in my personal experience, that is a better way to do it if you're going to set, is to let them have year 7, because there's such a dip between primary and secondary school, and everyone needs to settle, and no one's doing their best until before June anyway, and just give everyone that settling period and then go from there. But do you think, because obviously different subjects do this different ways, and certain subjects just don't set at all because they're taught in subjects, and we're obviously talking about secondary. This has absolutely no bearing on the average primary classroom. So from a secondary SEN point of view, do you think, and this is a stupid question because everyone's so different, but like, how do you think setting would affect SEN students? Like, let's assume like year 8 and year 9, key stage 3, forget year 7 for a second, is what are the benefits and drawbacks of setting for year 8 and year 9 in your experience?
So for set groups, for key stage 3, I think that having mixed ability groups would be, in an ideal world, fine if teachers were given the resources to be able to support them to differentiate accordingly to meet the learner's ability. I think where the real impact is at key stage 4 with setting groups to be able to support those learners based on attainment. However, I work in a school currently where we do have set for key stage 3, and I teach all the range of students, and it does work.
Mm-hmm.
However, when you have a, as you would say, bottom year 9 group, and that whole thing about mindset of, well, I'm in bottom group and therefore, I've been put in this class because of this, and this, and it could be based on behaviour, it could be based on, needs, literacy needs and things like that. But then when it comes to SEN high needs groups, I've got a high needs groups in year 8 and year 10, and the class sizes are, 8 and 5 in one of them. And though the really small classes and those needs for those learners are all met because everything is tailored to their needs, and they are getting the most support. And it's how you look at it really in different ways. If you look at a mixed ability group, in my last school, I taught mixability year 9, 10 and 11 for English. And in some respects, it worked really well for the lower attaining students because they were allowed to be stretched and challenged, and they were supported by other learners in the class. But then top set, as you called the top higher achieving students in that class, were they being stretched and challenged enough? And I think it's having that support and adequate techniques to support those students. But if you've got a class of 30 of them, then it can be really difficult to meet everybody's needs. And how do we go about doing that? And that's why I think sets do work for Key Stage 4. I really do, because then the attainment of the students and the ability, but also literacy has a major factor for all of these, because if we have students with reading ages of 7, 8 years old, and they have to access the curriculum, which is 16 years old, to be able to even read proficiently and to be able to do that, if you've got mixed ability groups, then they're going to really struggle to be able to, succeed. So it's how you're able to adapt to meet those learners on a level. And if you do have those sets, then it is a lot easier to do that, to be able to pitch it at a certain point. That obviously you stretch and challenge, and then you have to adapt to meet the needs of all of those learners. But yeah, it's a really hard one to set or not to set. And I think schools sometimes have a fear of, setting, but also contrastingly have a fear of having mixed ability groups. I think, it's kind of trial and error in some respects with that.
Yeah, and I do think it is one of those things that needs to be left up to the individual school to decide. I'm thinking of all of like my current experiences. Like I'll stand in the middle of one of my Key Stage 3 classes, and you've got kids who barely speak in English or can't write in English, and then you've got kids who you look at them and you see what they write and how they think and what they say, and you're like, oh, you have like every hope of getting 9s in language and lit at GCSE, and but if I can't push you, if I can't model those type of responses, because I'm having to model to the middle and then do like an extension and a scaffold. If I can't push you in that way, you're not going to get there. It's the rare student. It's a very small percentage of students who will be able to take that, what they're given that's pitched in the middle, and make it into a 9 on their own, or take that initiative, or do their research, or study enough, or learn enough, or practice enough on their own time. Like it's such a relative small number of students in a comprehensive school, but that the percentage that would be getting 7s, 8s, and 9s would be so much bigger if they were all in one class and I could show them all how it's done and really, really push them in that regard. And you literally physically cannot do that when they're in the same class as students who cannot or will not string a sentence. And I can complain about this all day, but I'm constantly reminded about history. History has a lot of the same skills and similar skills humanities do to what we do in English. And they, in every school, as far as I'm aware, they're always mixed ability. I mean, I'm sure there are exceptions, but in my experience, history teachers have always taught mixed ability classes. I don't know how they do that. And maybe there needs to be a little bit more, cross-curricular observation going on. Like I would be really, really interested in some CPD that looks at, matching up subjects that aren't, obviously none are the same as the other, but that have similarities in that regard, like practical subjects with practical subjects, and kind of language skills-based subjects with similar subjects, and seeing how teachers in those subjects work and how they support students in their classroom and are able to somehow magically differentiate for everyone, or at least convince themselves that they're doing it in a way that's in the best interest of anyone. Because I've been doing this for 14 years and I'm still like, actually today was a good day, to be fair. Friday, stood in my classroom on at least 2 occasions looking around me going, this is carnage. I could spend 6 hours preparing differentiated resources. I could do everything I physically can do, but in that 50-minute lesson, it is physically impossible for me to do everything that each one of these 31 students needs me to do to push them to reach their potential. Like I can't do it. I feel like we're constantly playing this game of either, oh, this is not good enough, but this is the best I can do, or sacrificing someone. And you're either sacrificing the top end or you're sacrificing the less able students. And I just feel like something always has to give. And maybe this is just the fundamental flaw with the education system, but I'm getting really tired of it. I just feel like I stand in the classroom and it's like, this is not what I'm here for. I'm failing every single one of you 31 young people because I'm not doing anything properly, because it's so hard. It's so incredibly hard. And if you group similar abilities together and don't do it based on stupid things like exactly what you said, Em, like sometimes kids end up in those bottom sets because of behavior. Well, that's the wrong reason. They should be in those smaller classes because they need more support to access the material. If their issue is they're throwing glue sticks around, that's a separate problem. They shouldn't be there. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like sets, I genuinely feel like sets are the way forward. I will die on this hill, provided that the sets are created with using the right criteria, and that kids aren't put in sync classes because they've been throwing glue sticks. And if a student who maybe is a little bit more able but needs to be in that smaller class, they should go in the smaller class. Like, you're doing it for the student. You're putting them in a particular class for that student's particular needs and to support them. I feel like as long as that's the logic behind it, I am 100% on board. So we've talked about class sizes, which we have no control over. Setting, which is usually a school-wide or at least a department policy. So I don't have any authority within my department. It's not my call to make. If we can't control those things, what should we be focusing on, I think, is my next question. So, and we've got some messages as well. So as soon as we come back, I'm going to hear from you, about your thoughts of what the average classroom teacher who has zero control over any of these things can do. That might make a bit of a difference. And I'm going to read a text that we just got from a TA, which I think will be insightful as well.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Have you checked out their latest releases? Use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading.
Introducing Eton X from Eton College, a diverse range of quality online courses enabling young people to aspire and excel. Designed for self-study, these web-based courses empower your students with essential leadership, communication, and academic skills for success at school and beyond. Our Study Skills course sharpens their learning abilities, while the AI Fundamentals course equips them with vital digital know-how in a fast-changing world. Other popular courses include verbal communication, critical thinking, writing skills, resilience, creative problem solving, and many more. Offer the Eton X curriculum in your school for free. Visit etonx.com to find out more.
Okay, so before we come back to M, because I just went on a bit of a rant there about my appreciation for well thought out class sets, we have a text from Kieran. So Kieran says, I work as a TA in my school's SEN department. So thank you so much for texting in, Kieran. This year, we introduced maths and English nurture classes for year 7 and 8, which are classes of max 6 students per class. Now, my last school has done this as well. There was shocker, there was a funding issue, which meant that we couldn't keep it up for year 8, I think, or year 9. One of them I was kind of leaving at the time, so I wasn't listening to their plans for next year. But they had to have fewer nurture classes than they wanted to. But this is something that my last school did as well. And I've taught those nurture classes, and it's so good to have those kids that have those particular needs in one particular room. So Kieran says, these nurture classes have enabled these students to have that extra one-on-one support, and their assessment scores have shown that it helps both SEND kids and non-SEND kids who are still struggling. You could argue that nurture is setting for the kids who are struggling. And again, I would agree with that. It's maybe not setting the entire year group, but it's taking a small number of high need students who really, for a range of reasons, need to be in a smaller setting away from the chaos of a large classroom, or who need that one-to-one support for that particular subject, usually maths and English, sometimes science, that schools do this for. They have those nurture groups for maths and English or core subjects. And it really allows them to work at their level without having to fight to be heard or fight to get support. The teacher can focus on those students and their individual needs and their individual learning without having to spin 32 plates at the same time and sacrifice anyone. It is like, honestly, I would back nurture classes in any setting that has students who would benefit from it. And again, I think most of the reason every school doesn't do it is funding. But I think also, as you said earlier, I think some schools are almost afraid to do this because of some sort of perceived like pushback, or what it would look like, or what the students would feel like, or how it would impact their self-esteem. Like, how do you think it impacts students' self-esteem when they're sitting in a class and 31 people get it and they don't? Like, do you think that doesn't impact their self-esteem? I don't know. So thank you, Kieran, for that. I'm getting very worked up about this. I told you I have strong feelings. So, have you ever worked in a school that had those really small nurture groups with any key stage students?
Yeah, at the school I work at now, we do. We have nurture groups for students, and it's great. So as I was saying, kind of very similar to Kieran, we have groups of maybe maximum 8 students. So I teach a nurture group for the year 8. Absolutely the most beautiful young people. Very
Yeah.
lively, very lively, keeping me
They've
in
been some
check
of my favorite classes. They really have.
They're absolutely amazing. I come home and I'm like, I've just had the best day with my year 8s.
Yeah.
Especially we're doing the art of rhetoric at the moment, persuasive
So are we.
skills, and
We're doing it with year 7.
looking at bias and and all their opinions, and it's amazing. And also I've got a year 10 nurture group as well, so very small class sizes, able to really tailor their needs. And I can tell you now, it is exactly the same as having a class of 30 students, because you are meeting those individual needs of those students, and a few strategies as a Senko, which I can share out for the bigger mixed ability classes.
Mm-hmm.
I will share with you in a moment, but I am able to tailor specifically exactly what each of those children needs based on their pupil passports, based on the gaps in their learning, and to really sit down with detailed analysis of their gaps, and looking at their reading ages and their vocabulary. Because I've been able to have that time, I've been able to have the opportunity to really get to know those students on an individual level, and obviously have a fantastic rapport with them. Because yes, they can be challenging at times, like all students are, doesn't matter
Mm-hmm.
what kind of students. But I think that's the biggest thing is, having those smaller classes is, predominantly the massive difference. So
Yeah.
the thing a lot is was about being a Senko and kind of the problem with the word differentiation. So in the past, differentiation has been understood by giving students with SEN easier work, and so that different, less ambitious learning objectives than their peers. However, differentiating by outcome doesn't work. So instead of turning it on its head with high quality teaching and what works for SEN students is kind of like broken down, really. So one thing that I'd say, which will probably sound we all do that, but is our language we use and explicit instruction. So for me, I've come from my last school teaching predominantly Key Stage 4 and A level to teaching Key Stage 3, and it's a totally different ball game with working Year 7. So one of the biggest thing I would say when you have a big mixed ability group is your seating plan is your savior, because at the end of the day, when you group your learners and you can have that flexible grouping and move those learners to working with learners who I'm trying to get this out of my head, working with learners and getting the students to work with the same ability or kind of mixed ability, but kind of on the same level as each of them, and pairing them together to maybe stretch and challenge them is a really good one. Making sure you have your SEN students in particular areas of the room that you know, and having a very good relationship with your TA if there is one, and your learning support. I think one thing that is so valuable are the TAs, and however we know that there is a recruitment crisis in schools for TA and the lack of support there is, mainly to funding and that, but things that are quite easy to adopt in the classroom that I think are explicit instruction. What are you asking those children to do, and the way you kind of pitch a question is really important, and making sure that you are able to promote inclusion and get everybody to have a go, and kind of thinking about your questioning very, very carefully in how you do that is one of the approaches. Nobody really thinks about, well, am I clear enough? I think one thing as a teacher for me is, how clear are my explanations, and modelling and frequent checkbacks and circulating through the whole room. One principle we go by at our school is kind of, I do it and teachers modelling something, and then guided practice, we do it. For example, if it was like, I don't know, in English, how the use of speech marks, for example, in a sentence, and then guided practice, I would ask the class where to show the speech marks in a sentence, and then independent practice, I do, we do, you do, and all about the timing, but making sure to use small, chunking, clear and ambitious language. I think there's nothing better than having explicit instruction and timings. I don't like to go over in terms of timings, but the importance of timing within the classroom and having a timer, but also giving the students understanding kind of like cognitive and metacognition strategies. So thinking about how students are able to manage cognitive load, and understanding how pupils are learning, and developing strategies such as planning and getting them to work independently. One thing I've learned as a Senko is sometimes with students' self-efficacy, whatever it's called.
Self-up, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Being able to, not give up and to actually build resilience is really important for them to be able to
Yeah.
do things independently. And I think sometimes we need to scaffold, but then take it away, provide students
Yeah.
with those opportunities, but not just giving the answer, and actually being able to take that away once they have been able to do that. So, for example, sentence starters, or being able to map out the component of a task, and to be able to then think back and go, well, my teacher's modelled this, so then I'm going to actually be able to do this, instead of just going, oh, I can't do this, can we do that together? And I think providing, breaking down a task into smaller steps so the student can achieve, will be able to do that. And I think by making it easier for students to provide the vocabulary that's needed, what is the meaning of this vocabulary, how is it used, but also applying it to real life context, to be able to support SEN students, or any students really, is to be able to apply a word, for example, not just within the context of the lesson, but also to see it. So, for example, what a big one was, a big one for us was, so what does this word mean? So how could it be used outside of context? And to also to link it to their daily lives, I think is a really good one. And how to know when to take that scaffolding down. So to provide support, instead of setting lower expectations for students, it's all about that entitlement, isn't it? Being able to give students ambitious goals and helping
Yeah.
them to be able to get there through that scaffolding, and to figure out how to take those students through those steps, and what
Yeah.
kind of
And I feel
detailed
in
support
my personal
is needed.
experience that, yeah, that's one of the harder things to do. So if you're, especially if you're hyper aware that, oh, this student, it says this on their IEP, or their pupil passport is suggesting this, or they've got this diagnosis, or I know this about them, or this happened last lesson, or you get these kind of, it's almost like a paranoia. It's almost like, I feel a little bit like a parent who's scared of their child going down the big hill on the, like, it feel a little bit like, oh, I don't want to let them go. Are they gonna get scared and not want to do it? Are they just gonna like throw their paper on the floor? What's gonna happen? Like, they need to have their sentence starters. They need to have this to support them. They need to have this. But I feel like sometimes you just have to let them fly, or not. Otherwise they're not going to learn it. Like, you have to step back at some point, and knowing when to do that is really tricky.
I think you're right. I think it is quite hard to know when to kind of let go sometimes as a teacher, making sure you want to support those students. So I had this with a year 7 student, and he's on his IEP. It says don't ask him questions out loud in front of the class. He doesn't want to read out loud. However, he was so gripped by this lesson we were having about Romeo and Juliet. And I said, so what do you think about this? And there he goes.
Yeah.
I said, so what do you think about this then? And he goes, I went, if you want to, you can say. If you don't want to, don't worry. Because sometimes he writes it on his whiteboard, then I read it out, or whatever like that. But no,
Yeah.
he was happy. He was, if students are passionate about things and they want to be able to, I think sometimes giving them the opportunity to, instead of scaring them off sometimes by, not giving them a voice, it can be detrimental. And I think it just depends on the actual situation. More than happy to just chat away, and absolutely loved it. So, but normally he would sit there, pen down, just focusing on what he's doing. But I said, what do you think? Do you want to share? And he goes, yeah. I was like, amazing. And that was one of his targets. So I think
I love
it
those
depends on the
moments.
rapport with that learners. It depends on the
Definitely.
rapport with the learners as well.
And Kieran's just sent another text in. So Kieran says, I had a student in a Spanish class today who beforehand we would never cold call for answers in class as they have severe ASD. Today, however, they put their hand up to answer a question. And even when they got one bit wrong, they went back and corrected themselves, which I can imagine is massive progress. I think when it comes to goals with students, both SEN and non-SEN students, it's important to remember that they will grow and change and progress alongside their classmates. And of course they will. I mean, things that are written on other people's passports are not, like, they're not written in stone. Kids grow, everybody grows and changes and develops. And I think we have to be not go against, I'm not saying ignore the IEPs or the people passports, but be willing to allow them to develop in their own natural way, and not inadvertently kind of hold them back because they have X, Y, or Z diagnosis, or because the people passport from last term says maybe do this. Like if the student shows that they're willing to put themselves out there, or to try something new, or to attempt something without the previously required scaffold, then it's our job to support them to do that, if we can do it when there's 31 other kids in the room. So
yeah, I would agree with you. I mean, they are like gold dust, to be fair, to get that that kind of like basic knowledge about what they need.
Yeah.
But then it obviously can be adapted all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think adaptability is super important, just in obviously teaching in general, working with kids in general, adaptability is key. And just because a student has a diagnosis or is quote unquote low ability, that shouldn't change. So we are at the end of our show. So thank you so much, Kieran, for your messages, your texts in from the point of a TA, always appreciated. And thank you so much, for coming on and discussing your experiences and how that's informed your teaching practice. There's lots of useful advice there, and I will take any chance I get to rant about sets and nurture groups, any chance at all. So thank you for providing that tonight. And I hope all of our listeners have a lovely almost midnight and a wonderful rest of the week.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.